We begin with a story that requires us to look very closely at the information coming out of Washington right now. In the middle of an active shooting war in the Middle East, the United States government is putting out statements that are being immediately contradicted by their own military, their own allies, and the very clear reality on the ground. We have to start with a message that was posted online a few days ago by the United States Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright. He published a public statement announcing that the United States Navy had successfully escorted a commercial oil tanker right through the Strait of Hormuz. He told the public that the president was maintaining the stability of global energy markets and that the military was actively making sure the oil kept flowing safely past Iranian forces. If you are a cabinet secretary and you announce a highly dangerous, high-stakes military operation in a combat zone, the basic assumption is that you checked your facts. You would think the Pentagon briefed him on the matter. You would think someone in the White House cleared the statement before it went out to the entire world. You would assume there was concrete evidence that the Navy was actually out there protecting civilian ships. But none of that was true. The United States Navy was not escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. They had not done it. They were not doing it. Within minutes, the Energy Secretary deleted the post. There was no explanation, no correction, and absolutely no apology to the public. But the financial markets reacted instantly. Oil prices swung wildly. Commodity traders who buy and sell energy for a living panicked. Millions of dollars moved based on a completely false claim. And that single false statement from a cabinet official was just the beginning of a much larger breakdown in how the administration is communicating about this war. To understand how serious this is, we have to look at how this conflict started and what the White House predicted would happen before the first shots were fired. When the president decided to launch this unprovoked military campaign against Iran, he reportedly told his top advisors that it would not disrupt global shipping. He did not believe the Iranian government would close the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a very narrow strip of water connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. It is the single most important energy crossing on the planet. Roughly 20% of the entire world's supply of oil goes through that tiny gap. To give you an idea of the geography, the strait is only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, and the actual shipping lanes for massive tankers are only 2 miles wide in each direction. If that water is closed to traffic, the global economy takes an immediate and massive hit. The president told his team that Iran would not touch it. Iran immediately touched it. They closed the strait the moment the war started. In response, the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, went in front of the cameras and told the American people that the strait was completely open for transit. He said commercial ships could go right through. The only problem was that Iranian forces were actively firing on the ships that tried to do exactly that. The president then went on Fox News and offered his own military advice to the global shipping industry. He said commercial ship captains just needed to show some guts. He told them to ignore the warnings and sail through the strait because they had nothing to fear. He claimed Iran was already defeated and would not attack any more vessels. Right after he said that, Iran launched another wave of attacks on ships in the strait. They used drones. They used missiles. They hit tankers. The water was literally burning. When it became obvious that the commercial ships were not going to just blindly sail through a wall of Iranian missiles, the president changed his strategy again. He announced that the United States Navy would very soon begin a massive operation to personally escort the oil tankers. He said American warships would pull up right next to the commercial vessels and guide them safely through the firing line. The response from the actual United States Navy was an immediate and hard no. The military leadership had to go to the White House and explain the physical reality of the situation to the commander-in-chief. They told the administration that they were rejecting the daily requests from the shipping industry for protection. The military used a very specific term to describe the idea of putting American destroyers in that narrow waterway right now. They called it a kill box. The water is simply too narrow. The ships are incredibly slow. The Iranian missile batteries on the shoreline are way too close. Putting Navy sailors in there to babysit slow-moving oil tankers would be a suicide mission. So the Navy refused to do it. That military rejection created a massive political problem for the White House. So ahead of a major presidential press conference today, unnamed administration sources started leaking a brand new story to the press. They told reporters that the government was about to announce a massive, worldwide coalition of military allies. The story was that a grand international alliance was going to share the burden and work together to escort the ships through the strait. The leaks were planted everywhere. The administration promised that we would finally hear the names of all the brave countries stepping up to help us in this joint worldwide effort. A lot of news outlets ran with that story. They assumed that because the White House was leaking it, it was a real, verified plan. But then the president walked up to the podium for his press conference, and he completely destroyed the story his own staff had just planted. He stood at the microphones and declared that the United States does not need anybody to help in the Strait of Hormuz. He said the military could do it completely alone and completely rejected the idea of an international coalition. But he did not stop there. A few minutes later, in the exact same press conference, he completely reversed himself again and said he would actually be announcing the names of the countries helping us very soon. And then, as if that was not confusing enough, he spent the next 10 minutes loudly insulting our international allies for refusing to help us in the Middle East. It was completely contradictory from start to finish. Reporters all over the world did their jobs and immediately started calling foreign capitals to find out what was actually happening. They called officials in London, Paris, and Tokyo. The answer they got from our allies was incredibly clear. Nobody is coming to help. The international community is sitting this war out. The harsh reality is that the president cannot do this alone, and his own military just told him they cannot do it right now because the water is a kill box. So we are left with a closed strait, a spiking oil market, and a military that cannot execute the promises being made on television. There is one country, however, that is benefiting massively from this exact situation. That country is Russia. Before this war started, Russia was burning through its cash reserves to fund its own grinding, disastrous war in Ukraine. The Russian economy was struggling under heavy international sanctions. But now, because the United States started a war in the Middle East that shut down the primary artery for global oil, the price of crude has skyrocketed. All of that panic in the energy markets translates directly into hard cash for Moscow. The high price of oil is filling up the Kremlin bank accounts right now. It is making Vladimir Putin's government solvent again. We are essentially generating the revenue Russia needs to keep fighting its war in Europe. But Russia is not just sitting back and counting the money. They're actively participating in the Middle East conflict on the side of Iran. They are helping the Iranian military target and attack United States troops and facilities. This is not a rumor. The president's own ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, went on television and publicly confirmed it. He said Russia has established a wartime strategic partnership with Iran. Iranian government officials are publicly bragging about the exact same thing. They're openly confirming their military cooperation with Moscow. Russia is using the oil money created by our war to help Iran shoot at American soldiers. You might logically expect the American government to respond aggressively to a foreign nation helping to kill American troops. You would expect severe consequences. But the administration is doing the exact opposite. Instead of punishing Russia for this betrayal, the president has actually relaxed United States sanctions on Russia. And just in the last week, he did it again. He ordered further relief from economic sanctions for Moscow. While Russian intelligence helps Iran drop rockets on American bases in the Persian Gulf, the White House is making it legally easier for Russia to do business around the world. It completely undermines the entire purpose of having sanctions in the first place. The favors to the Russian government do not end with sanctions relief. There is a new report out today from David Korn at Mother Jones magazine regarding the Department of Justice. The Justice Department has chosen this specific moment, right in the middle of a war against an Iranian regime backed by Moscow, to execute a massive legal favor for a known Russian intelligence asset. The Justice Department is actively asking the federal courts to withdraw a guilty plea and throw out a prison sentence for a man named Alexander Smirnov. This is the man who the FBI explicitly stated is connected to Russian intelligence. He has been sitting in federal prison because he pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. He admitted that he brought federal agents completely fabricated stories about President Joe Biden taking bribes from a Ukrainian energy company. Those fake stories were the entire foundation for an impeachment inquiry in Congress that ultimately collapsed. The FBI investigated the claims and found that the bribery stories were total garbage. They also told the court that this man intentionally lied to American law enforcement at the exact same time he was working with Russian intelligence agents. He confessed, he took a guilty plea, and he went to prison. The case was completely closed. But now, the Justice Department is actively petitioning a federal judge to get him out of prison and reverse the conviction entirely. The official paperwork filed in court to free this Russian asset was signed by Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche is the president's former personal defense attorney. The president handpicked him to be the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. So the second highest ranking law enforcement officer in the country is personally signing court documents trying to free a Russian intelligence asset at the exact moment Russia is helping Iran attack American troops. The timing and the optics are completely staggering. It seems the administration is willing to bend over backwards to help Moscow. But the actions of the Justice Department regarding Iran are just as difficult to explain. While the president is dropping bombs on Iran and sending thousands of American troops into a combat zone to fight the Iranian regime, his Justice Department is quietly making massive legal concessions to them. Entirely under the radar, the Justice Department has just moved to drop the single largest Iranian sanctions evasion case in the history of the United States. This is a massive federal criminal case involving a Turkish bank called Halkbank. The United States government indicted the bank for illegally laundering tens of billions of dollars and sending it directly to the Iranian government. That is money Iran used to fund its military. It is money they used to fund their proxy groups across the region. It is money they used to build the exact same missiles they are currently firing at American service members. Federal prosecutors spent years building what they considered a slam dunk case against the bank. But right now, while the military is fighting a war to supposedly stop Iranian aggression, the Justice Department is dropping the case. The prosecution is just gone. The administration is letting the largest financial crime ever committed on behalf of the Iranian government completely slide without any trial. The public explanations for this war simply do not match the actions the government is taking behind closed doors. To understand what might actually be driving this policy, you have to look closely at the money. A few years ago, the government of Saudi Arabia took $2 billion directly from their sovereign wealth fund and gave it to the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. They placed that money into a brand new private equity fund that he set up the moment he left his job at the White House the first time. Fast forward to today, and Jared Kushner is back in the government. He is officially serving as the lead negotiator and the primary point person for the United States in the Middle East. He is the man making the deals and shaping the policy. The New York Times is now reporting that while he is doing that government job, he is simultaneously going back to the Saudi government and asking them for even more money for his private business. He wants billions more on top of the $2 billion they already gave him. The Saudi royal family has every reason to say yes to that request. They have apparently realized that for a few $billion, they can effectively point the United States military at their biggest regional rival. Saudi Arabia and Israel have wanted a war with Iran for years. It serves their regional interests perfectly. But this war does absolutely nothing to help the United States. It damages our economy, it drains our military resources, and it puts American lives at risk. But the Saudis are getting exactly what they paid for. This situation is playing out right in front of us in plain sight. The president's son-in-law is actively asking a foreign government for billions of dollars for his personal wealth. At the exact same time he is asking them for cash, he is personally directing United States foreign policy regarding that specific country. You do not need a degree in international relations to see where this leads. If the person making the policy is financially dependent on the country he is dealing with, the policy is going to reflect what that country wants. If he does not give them what they want, he is probably not going to get the billions of dollars he is asking for. The core national security interests of the United States are being traded for private income. While American families sit at home wondering why gas prices are destroying their budgets and why we are fighting a war that makes no sense, the answer is sitting right there in a private equity account. And the public has no way of knowing the full extent of these financial ties because the administration is not requiring him to file public financial disclosure forms. He is operating completely in the dark without any transparency whatsoever. The domestic reaction to all of this has been severe. This is currently the most unpopular war in modern American history. The polling numbers are incredibly low. The public is angry and nobody wants to be involved in this conflict. The president is attempting to manage that public anger by lashing out at the press. He is literally threatening to execute reporters who do not cover the war exactly the way he wants them to cover it. He is calling journalists enemies of the state just for reporting the basic, verifiable facts of the conflict. Threatening the media is not going to lower the price of gas, and it is not going to open the Strait of Hormuz. It is just another tactic to deflect attention from the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is that the military campaign is not working the way the administration promised. The president can go on television every single day and declare total victory, but his words do not stop the rockets from hitting our bases. United States forces and facilities across the region are taking heavy fire from Iran and their proxy militias. A military facility in Bahrain was hit. A base in Kuwait was hit. The American embassy in Iraq was targeted. Facilities in Saudi Arabia are under constant threat. The planning for this operation has been so disorganized that we are losing aircraft to our own allies. On the very first full day of the war, the airspace over the Persian Gulf was such a complete disaster that the air defense systems in Kuwait accidentally shot down our own fighter jets. They shot down 3 American F-15 fighter jets. These are multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment blown out of the sky by a friendly nation because the command and control structure was completely broken. If you cannot establish a safe flight corridor with an ally, you cannot safely run an air war. Thankfully, the pilots survived the incident, but the level of incompetence required for that to happen is staggering. It is a massive military embarrassment that the administration tried to bury from the public. Because the air campaign is failing to achieve its basic objectives, because the Strait of Hormuz remains firmly closed, and because American bases are still taking rocket fire, the mission is already beginning to expand. Tonight, the Pentagon is sending a Marine Expeditionary Force into the region. Thousands of United States Marines are moving into the combat zone. When reporters asked the president directly if he was planning to put boots on the ground in Iran, he flatly refused to rule it out. He would not commit to keeping American ground troops out of the fight. Just a week ago, the administration promised the public that this would be a quick, clean, and highly effective operation. Today, the most important shipping lane in the world is completely shut down. The global economy is cracking under the pressure of soaring energy costs. Our own allies are accidentally shooting down our planes because the battlefield is complete chaos. And thousands of Marines are packing their gear for a potential ground war that the American public absolutely does not want. We will continue to follow the money, the military movements, and the statements coming out of Washington. The reality of this conflict is shifting by the hour, and we will bring you the facts exactly as they happen, regardless of what the administration claims on social media. Thank you for joining us tonight.